Russia, whose economy has been fully mobilized for war, is now spending more on defense than all European nations combined, including the United Kingdom. These findings come from the Military Balance Report conducted by the UK-based International Institute for Strategic Studies. Russia's total defense expenditures have surged by 42%, reaching 13 trillion rubles, equivalent to $462 billion. In comparison, the combined defense budgets of European nations, including the UK and EU member states, increased by nearly 12% last year, falling $5 billion short of Moscow's military spending.
A study conducted by a Harvard Kennedy School analyst in collaboration with J.P. Morgan and other investment banks revealed that under pressure from the military lobby, Russia's defense industry has received nearly $300 billion in loans from the banking system, loans it is unable to repay. This means either banks go bankrupt or someone has to cover these losses. The burden falls on either the central bank or the Ministry of Finance, which leads to inflation.
Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War point out that the Kremlin is prolonging an information campaign to obscure the negative effects of the war in Ukraine on Russia's economy. Experts note that Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin recently claimed in a meeting with Putin that Russia's GDP has reached a historic high, growing by 4%, while inflation for 2024 stood at nearly 10%. However, analysts argue these figures are significantly understated.
Russia's true inflation is quite higher than the official statistics the Kremlin is willing to publicize, however. Several studies indicate that Russia's inflation rate is closer to 20%. Ms. Houston and Putin notably did not mention how the Russian central bank raised the interest rate to 21% in October 2024, or how Russia has been drawing from its National Welfare Fund to finance its war effort over the last 3 years. The liquidity portion of Russia's National Welfare Fund may run out by fall 2025. From a report by the Institute for the Study of War.
Experts forecast that in 2025 Russia's military expenditures will increase by more than 13%, reaching 15.6 trillion rubles. Despite the strain on its economy, Russia remains capable of sustaining such high wartime expenditures, the IISS notes. However, Russia's budget deficit has skyrocketed, growing 14 times larger compared to January last year due to a sharp rise in spending that has already surpassed the annual target, reports the Moscow Times.
In January, expenditures, according to preliminary estimates, were higher than revenues by 1,710 billion rubles, or 0.8% of GDP, compared with the budgeted deficit for the year of 1,170 billion rubles, or 0.5% of GDP. A year ago in January, the budget was implemented with a deficit of 124 billion rubles, from the Moscow Times publication.
Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the country's annual budget deficit has consistently exceeded 3 trillion rubles, around 2% of GDP. The Russian Ministry of Finance has attempted to cover this gap through domestic borrowing and by withdrawals from the National Wealth Fund, whose available reserves have already been reduced by 2/3.
Gazprom's economy is deflating, along with enterprises that cannot cover their losses. They will be bailed out using the state budget and the central bank. This means taking money out of Russians' pockets and redirecting it to enterprises that cannot repay their loans. These companies are being rescued, allowing them to continue living lavishly.
Эксперты отмечают, что европейцы могут столкнуться с серьезными вызовами в сфере безопасности, если Соединенные Штаты сократят поддержку Украины и Европы. Президент США Дональд Трамп неоднократно заявлял, что страны Европы должны увеличить свои оборонные расходы до 5% ВВП. Сейчас они не дотягивают до 2%. Генеральный секретарь НАТО Марк Рютте считает, что европейские расходы на оборону должны вырасти до 3%. Виктория Смирнова для телеканала Freedom. Reported by Sergey Kulyas, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News. The European Union has extended sanctions against Russia for another 6 months after Hungary dropped its objections in exchange for assurances regarding energy security.
So I welcome the ministers today agreed to extend sanctions on Russia. This will continue to deprive Putin of revenues to fund his war.
According to Kaja Kallas, the EU is planning to introduce its next 16th package of sanctions against Russia in February, ahead of the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As reported by Bloomberg, citing a draft document from the European Commission, Brussels is considering a phased ban on importing Russian aluminium. According to Trade Data Monitor from January to November 2024, the 27 EU member states imported nearly 330,000 tons of Russian primary aluminium and alloy.
The sanctions package would allow European buyers to import 275,000 metric tons of the Russian metal under a quota system for 1 year period before a full ban comes into effect. The import volume quotas would be managed by member states and the EU's executive arm, from the Bloomberg publication.
The EU is also considering phasing out Russian liquefied natural gas. However, for now, the 27 member states are discussing a gradual reduction in purchases. According to a Kpler report published on January 28, Russian LNG shipments to the EU reached a record height of 33.6 million tons in 2024. In December 2024, 10 EU countries, including Finland, Poland and the Baltic states, urged the European Commission to impose a full ban on Russian pipeline gas and LNG imports.
Lithuania remains hopeful for the upcoming EU roadmap to completely sever all Russian energy ties. Žygimantas Vaičiūnas, Minister of Energy of Lithuania, in a commentary for Politico.
The EU's 16th sanctions package against Russia includes penalties for 74 oil tankers belonging to Russia's so-called shadow fleet. The document notes that certain exceptions will apply. The package also proposes restrictions on software and other technologies used in the Russian military's weapons systems. The measures target dozens of companies, including many firms in China, Turkey and other countries that have helped Moscow bypass existing sanctions.
We discuss what more can we do, putting pressure on Russia to end this war. It is also good that US President Donald Trump has put the pressure on Russia to say that it's in their hands to end this war.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio welcomed the EU expanded sanctions against Russia. During a phone call with EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Kaja Kallas, he emphasized the importance of strengthening transatlantic security. The EU and the US are always stronger together, the EU head of diplomacy concluded. Reported by Serhiy Kulas, Christina Dombrovska, UATV News.